This House is in session.
The Speaker revert to papers.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the report of the Law Reform Commission for the period 2019, June to December of 2022. I'm further commanded to lay the annual report of the Police Complaints Authority for the period January 1 to December 31st, 2021.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm commanded to lay the audited financial statements of the Barbados Community College for the years ended March 31st, 2010, March 31st, 2011, and March 31st, 2012, as well as the annual report 2020 to 2021 and the audited financial statement for the year ended 2021 of the Darrell Jordan Secondary School.
Revert to government business.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is in Standing Finance Committee.
Mr. Chairman, Head 30, Attorney General, in the amount of $113,939,199.
Mr.
Honourable
Chairman,
Member for St. Joseph.
if you would be so kind, I respectfully ask that you allow the member for the city and the staff of the Office of the Attorney General to join me in the well of Parliament.
So granted.
You know, the bypass me yesterday. Last time, the bypass me before I was first, and I made fifth.
Good morning to all, especially our guests here this morning. I will now go through the procedure for this session. The minister will have 10 minutes for his opening remarks. And his minister within the ministry, he will so direct. The minister also has 5 minutes to respond to each question that may be raised. The officers here present, as they respond to questions based on how the minister directs, it is a 3-minute response time. So you have 3 minutes to respond. And we ask that as you're speaking for the first time in Parliament, you would give your name and the title which you hold. Honourable members are aware that you have your questions to the minister should not exceed 3 minutes, and you also are allowed 3 supplementary questions at any one intervention. But you can return with subsequent interventions thereafter. Honourable Attorney General, you may give your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members of this chamber, colleague minister, members of the staff of the Office of the Attorney General, I am particularly honored to have the opportunity after the hiatus since when the Office of the AG was last permitted or invited to sit in the Well of Parliament to discuss in detail our various programs. While, sir, no ministry is more important than the other, the question of law enforcement, the question of law and order, the system of justice must always be seen as playing a pivotal role in our society. Our society is able to maintain its stability because of the rule of law, and it is my pleasure and honor to have the responsibility for the Office of the Attorney General, which has superintendence in a very general way of the rule of law. Of course, sir, these have been trying times, and there have been a number of things which have crept almost stealthily into our society that serve to threaten our way of life. In the Barbados Labour Party's Covenant of Hope, published, I think it was in 2016 or 2017, we committed that a central tenet of anything that we do would be to ensure that law and order has the first call on state resources. Now, I believe that it is fair to say that from the estimates that we're seeking to have approved for the year 2023 to 24, we have stayed true to that particular commitment. Mr. Chairman, in 2021-22, in that financial year, the amount of money, both statutory and non-statutory, that was approved for the Office of the Attorney General was $161+ million. For the financial year 2022-23, the year that we are currently in, and the figure is likely to go up somewhat, but the approved estimates of expenditure is $163 million. Now, while you might say that that creep by just $2 million is not significant, I invite you especially to consider what is being given to us for the financial year 2023-24. Sir, I repeat, 2022-23, we were given $163 million to discharge our responsibility. For the coming financial year, sir, we are going to be receiving $197 million. that is a government that is staying true to the central tenets, sir, that law and order would be able to have the first stake on our national resources. Part of that significant increase, Mr. Chairman, is due to the creation of a special new ministry, or a special new arm of this ministry, which relates to crime prevention. And that particular sector, sir, will receive $12.5 million. This is a new figure. And they will be inviting Minister Lane to give the chamber context and a brief overview of what he intends to do during the course of the coming year. In the Office of the Attorney General's budget, sir, the police service lays claim to the single largest amount. Of that $197 million, sir, the police service will be claiming $131 million. Again, I want to make the point that this represents a significant increase over what was budgeted in the current financial year, sir. In the current financial year, the police service is receiving, I should say, because the year hasn't quite ended yet, $114 million. 114. In the coming financial year, sir, the police service will be receiving $131 million. Again, sir, demonstrating our tangible commitment to law and order. But the point is, sir, we recognize that the issue of maintaining stability in our society cannot just focus on law enforcement alone. Law enforcement comes generally after the fact. That's the role of the police. But what is important for us, sir, is not watching our young men and women spiral down a vicious road leading to nowhere, but instead it is an obligation as a serious government to devote dedicated resources to diverting them from that path. So this really is a two-pronged approach to maintaining stability in our society. Law enforcement on the one hand, and crime prevention on the other. And it stands to reason, sir, that if you reduce the incidence of people getting into crime, if you prevent our young men and women from going down that difficult road, then it will certainly make things easier on the arm of the Barbados Police Service. I anticipate, sir, that at least during the morning session, we will have a robust discussion on the police service, and I therefore just want to give you a brief overview on what we expect of them in the coming year. Mr. Chairman, let me begin, though, by thanking the members of the police service for doing an amazing job in difficult times. These are the days, sir, when every time a police officer steps out of a vehicle, there's someone standing with a phone, watching to see if they will commit some faux pas, make some misstep, let go some curse word, mash somebody the wrong way, not for the purpose of upholding or uplifting what the police are doing, but largely for the purpose of finding some salacious thing, some snippet, some mishap to send out on Facebook or to create some new meme, sir. And I am now the expert on memes, having been the subject of many of them. Mr. Speaker, it is a difficult environment for the police to operate in. It's difficult because the demands of our society have changed over the years. There was a point in time, sir, when a police officer told somebody, move, that they would move. Now when a police officer tells somebody to move, there's a good chance that you will see some reluctance, some diffidence, some resistance, and in some instances, outright abuse. There was a time when getting charged for cursing a police officer was a serious thing. Now, I have my views. I hope that the police chief will recognize that our society has changed somewhat. But there was a level of respect accorded to the men and women in blue that has been dwindling. And I believe that disrespect that has been dwindling has been at the same time as the level of criminal activity in certain quarters has been increasing. But the point is, sir, that policing is no longer the genteel thing that it was when we were growing up. It is now a very challenging profession. reflected in part because of some of the difficulties in attracting police officers. What has been our response to some of these challenges? Well, certainly, sir, you see increased funding. Police need to have the resources to get the job done, and we're committed to giving them. I don't know of any ministry that can say that they've got a 20 million jump. I believe I am the envy of all of my colleagues. But we're giving them the resources that they need to get the job done. But we're also saying to them that they have an obligation to come in to the 21st century. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do. In fact, some members of this chamber still like the feel of paper in their hands. Even though we have technology, I too, sir, still like the feel of paper in my hands. I asked the Minister of Finance, where is my estimates book? Because even though we have it electronically, I too like to make notes in the margins and so on. That's something that we will change over time. But we are asking the police service to come in to the 21st century, and we've provided them with body cameras, we've provided them with handheld devices to facilitate how they conduct investigations, how they take statements, and so on. A lot of emphasis is already placed on technology, but you will see that increasing in the police service. Mr. Chairman, we're also asking the police service to begin to do things differently. And in that regard, I'm able to say that the Office of the Attorney General has engaged the services of a now retired Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Honourable Williams, to come back to analyze all of the procedures in the police service. There are some very archaic processes, sir. A lot of steps that perhaps are not necessary. And we're trying to get that analysis done. We're placing a tremendous emphasis on training, Mr. Chairman. For the past 2 years, we've had an immersion program with the Constabulary of Durham. If there's one thing, Mr. Chairman, that we genuinely feel has been a problem in the police service, has been the deficit of training. When we look through the records, we can't see any significant amount of training being done. There is some, not suggesting that there isn't, but in terms of continued training, we believe that there's a deficit there that needs to be filled. There was a time, sir, when the service would look to 1 or 2 senior officers and send them to a place called Bramshill to spend a year. That's the military equivalent of Sandhurst. That hasn't happened in quite a few years. So we've, in the last 2 years, sent 11 police officers at a senior rank, 5 in the first cohort, 6 last year, to immerse them with the Durham Constabulary, so that they, for 6 weeks, so that they can learn by participation a high level of police leadership ability. The challenge with that, sir, is that sending out 6 police every year, or 12 every year, out of a total population, police population of just around 1,200, the commissioner will remind me the exact figure that we have now. It'll take us forever. So one of the initiatives that we're taking in the coming financial year, sir, is bringing in expert trainers from Canada, from the US, and from England, so that our officers don't have to leave Barbados, but that our officers can receive training non-stop, around the clock. We can do larger numbers. We need to have the finest police force in the region, but we can only do it, sir, if all of our people are trained. And training is important. And may I say, because I see the members of St. Thomas out of the corner of my eye, and I thank you for your indulgence, sir, as far as my time goes. In recent times, the police service has had some criticisms. They've been criticized because sensitive statements have made their way onto social media. They've been criticized because people have had to say, my response, my interaction with a particular member of the force was far from salutary. They have said that some have been surly, some have been downright rude. Others have said that they're not gender sensitive, particularly in areas when it comes to some kinds of threats, generally to women. They've not demonstrated what is expected of a modern police force, modern police service. So in many respects, the training will not just be training how to investigate crime, training how to detect crime. There's also a softer side of training that we propose to put in place. But I hope, sir, that I'll have a chance to go into some of the other programs. Let me say that the Office of the Attorney General is not just about policing, however. The Attorney General is the Chief Legal Advisor to the Government of Barbados. And so I'm honored to have with me the Solicitor General, whose responsibility is the civil side of the legal arrangements of the country, all of the contracts, all of the claims. They have to litigate all of the claims against the government of Barbados, sometimes by themselves, but occasionally with senior lawyers from the outside. I also have the Chief Parliamentary Counsel. The work that particular office has done over the last 4 years, sir, has been extraordinary. I want to compliment them in this place, and your thumps on the table as legislators will be more than welcome at this time. Without the work of the CPC, sir, I don't know where this chamber would be. And it has been tough to keep that band of warriors going, but they have been up to the task on every occasion. Sir, we have a lot to talk about today. I hope that we'll be able to present to this chamber an impressive program to justify the increase of the funding that we're asking for. And at this point, I will use my good judgment and note the affluction of time and ask Minister Lane, member for the city, to address the chamber briefly.
Thank you very much, Attorney General, Chairman, and colleagues. I just briefly want to touch on the new sub-program 263, but allow me to start with some quotes from the Crime and Violence in Barbados, the IDB series on crime and violence in the Caribbean by Corinne Bailey. And Corinne Bailey points to the fact that the level and changing nature of crime in many Caribbean countries have been giving cause for increased concern. He suggests that the rapid growth of urban areas in the 19th century and the early 20th century have led to this increase as persons move from inland in the agricultural time more to the urban areas. Trotman, 1986, supports this. When we move to McElroy and Albuquerque, 1982, really speaks to the gaining momentum in the 1960s when we transitioned from plantation economies to tourism and light manufacturing economies. Now, if you fast forward today, the report speaks to a situation where the main feature of crime in the Caribbean is high level of violent crime, with homicide rates rising rapidly in most Caribbean countries. Barbados, he notes, though, however, is a notable exception with relatively low levels of violent crime. I pause here to say that this is not a situation that we point to say others are higher, because Barbados has been traditionally known as a very peaceful place, a very civil place, and therefore any increase, any spate would cause even greater concern within our society. It is for this reason that the government has strengthened its hand in relation to law enforcement and added an increased measure towards crime prevention in the medium and long term, and hence the reason for sub-program 263. To give members and the public a good understanding or overview of what 263 will be doing in the coming financial year, we are looking at a Live Wise campaign, and that campaign is really to take us back to our roots of wise sayings and wisdom as exposed and taught by our elders within the society. A major plank in that program is the direct intervention program, which is seeking and already reaping results in relation to pressing the flesh and getting back on the ground and working with some of our at-risk and high-risk individuals. One of the things recognized, sir, in preparing this program is that we really moved from the era of community, youth, church, faith-based activity, even prior to COVID, to one where a lot of young people were left to raise themselves, either among themselves on the corner or by technology, television, YouTube, and the very long list goes on. One of the things that we believe and one of the things that we will be pursuing, a hot pursuit, will be the return by saturating this country with positive alternative activities so that no longer will the choice be a block or nothing. There must be a serious choice when we tell our young people and our community members to put down the violence, put down the war. We must give them something to pick up. And sub-program 263 will seek to fill their hands, their hearts, and their minds with something positive and wholesome, but still in a fun, challenging, and adventurous way, as many young people, many of us growing up, sought to do. Another major plank is national engagement, where we look to strengthen the hands of many ministries existing here, whether it be education, youth, sports, community empowerment, people empowerment, and many others, by seeking to add, again, these wholesome activities, these adventurous activities, in a structured way, in a way that they will seek to be a part of community once again. Quickly running through, there'll be community-based initiatives, family-based initiatives, school-based initiatives, rehabilitation programs, and adding to the already strengthened program of enforcement, intelligence and tactical initiatives, where we will be lobbying based on information received by doing these programs. So in other words, we have a project unit and we're working with a number of NGOs who will be in touch with the communities, vulnerable and others. And using that information, we plan to translate that into policy by using our experience and information and transitioning into policy via the already established arms for the above-mentioned enforcement, intelligence, and tactical initiatives. Institutional reforms will also be on the list of things that we will be continue to assess and making recommendations towards, and legal and judicial enhancements. And finally, sir, in this 263 will be supportive initiatives, and this is really looking at how today's technology can enhance the way that we deliver this program. Through apps, platforms, dashboards, websites, you name it, we plan to engage with it to make sure that we have the most efficient way in making sure that the program of crime prevention, what we are calling peace promotion, is done throughout this country. I want to close my brief introductory remarks with giving an understanding of the phases and also the pillars involved in doing this. The phases really, phase one was really the short-term phase of trying to reduce what we call the heat on the streets, and then moving on to the more medium and long-term aspects in terms of introducing a number of social interventions to make sure that that peaceful behavioral modification is done in a way that it can be sustained. So, sir, in essence, we are here to support the work of this ministry, and I want to close by thanking the Attorney General and this entire ministry for welcoming me, my team, and this program, sub-program 263. Thank you very much, Chairman.
I beg to move that this head 30 stand part, sir.
Thank you, Honorable AG and Honorable Member for the City of Bridgetown. We will now proceed with our question and answer segment. And just to remind members that you should not exceed 3 minutes with your question. We start with the Honorable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first, let me, Minister Attorney General, congratulate you and your team for the tremendous work that you have been able to do, really from the time this administration has come into office. not only the tremendous work that the police service done and that the police service is doing and has done, but also the tremendous work that the CPC, as you said, clearly this Parliament would not be where it is without all of the work that the CPC has done. But all of the other things that you have done as well. As you know, I was also able to assist when you did the renovations at the old law courts and be able to get those and now renamed after Sir Henry Ford and Sir David Simmons. And that obviously was very important. And obviously the reason why that is important is it helps you to be able to deliver justice and be able to get people to get their matters resolved at the law courts. At the end of the day, there's the old adage, justice delayed is justice denied. And I always get very concerned about how long it takes to get a particular matter heard before the law courts. And I know that this administration has appointed new judges and has done the renovations. We also were able to get other facilities to be able to use as courts. And my question will be related to that. What other plans do you have to be able to clear the tremendous backlog of matters to be held before the courts, both civil and criminal? If you could answer that, please.
Thank you very much, Member for Christchurch West. And I appreciate your hard work in helping us with that facility, and I appreciate your question. From almost time immemorial, I suppose, people have been complaining about delays in the judicial system. I've been practicing law now for 33 years. Of recent time as Attorney General, I should be more precise. And from the outset, we've been complaining about delays. But the fact is that those delays they seem to have snowballed. Now, we recognized upon coming to government that the delays were presenting a greater problem than just to the individuals involved. I remember giving a speech. It didn't go unchallenged, but I echoed the comments of one of the judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice who remarked that just about every piece of litigation represents a circumstance where a person's ability to do something is locked up. Often, that relates to your ability to mobilize some kind of property in one way or another. So let us suppose, to use a simple example, somebody sues another, claiming damages for personal injury. It represents a locking up of assets because the person who is being sued has to make some kind of a provision to be able to pay at a point in time in the future. And the person who is suing wants to be able to realize that asset. If you take an estate, for example, a delay in dealing with an estate means that that estate is frozen. Now, it therefore means that if we're able to have a judicial system that moves things through quickly, we will see the easier mobilization of resources, not just of the people in the court and the people in the system, but also very often of financial resources. I remember being in a major corporate case which involved an injunction relating to a major company in Barbados, and for the length of time that matter was in the system, the parties couldn't make a decision to go forward. So it's not just, I'm making the point, first of all, it's not just that the delay affects the parties to the case, but there's also a macro dynamic. There's a larger issue, because by tying up assets, by freezing those assets, by freezing the ability of people to deal with their assets, we are actually retarding economic activity. So we recognize that it was imperative that we make major changes. We began, Mr. Chairman, by appointing additional judges. Now, let me say that I don't know of another country in the region that has taken this approach and has been so activist in relation to providing manpower to the judiciary, adding bodies to the judiciary. Sir, when we came to government, we had, I believe it was only 5 high court judges in the lower court, and I think it was 5 in the Court of Appeal. We immediately increased the number of judges and moved that number of judges in the lower court to, I think we increased it by an additional 5, and then we added an additional 3 temporary judges. You mentioned the criminal, and I just want to make this, to segue into this. When we came to government, sir, we found only 2 judges doing criminal cases at any given time. By the time we came to government, the backlog of criminal cases was over 1,000. 1,000, and only 2 judges sitting on criminal cases. Simple mathematics, 1,000 criminal cases to be heard in the Supreme Court, I could say indictment, but think jury trial for the most part, all right? Those kind of serious cases. Dividing that 1,000 by 2, you get 500. Now, there's only so many cases a judge can do. There are only so many cases that courts can prosecute. So we would never get rid of that backlog. So we began by immediately appointing 3 temporary judges to increase the number from 2 to 5. Of course, sir, that began to work very well, and I must pay tribute to those judges. The criminal bench has really stepped up. Those 5 judges have really stepped up to the plate. But COVID hit. And during those 2 years of COVID, we couldn't do jury trials. Now, I will say to their credit that in each of those 2 years, they disposed of 200 indictable matters. You can dispose of matters other than by trial. People plead guilty and so on. Some may get nolly pros, but so in each of those 2 years, 200 were disposed of. So we were able to dispose of 400 during those 2 years without jury trials. But of course, sir, you keep adding, so the backlog is still up there. So our response has been to appoint a further 3 criminal judges. So we've gone, sir, from 2 to 5 to 8. And that's where the new facility, the Ford Simmons complex comes in, because that facility is going to accommodate 3 of those judges. As I speak, sir, 7 of those, we now have a total criminal bench active of 7, but because 1 court in the Ford Simmons complex is not yet ready because of some challenges with the supply chain of certain critical inputs, we have 7 judges who are sitting at the present. That 3rd court, which used to be the number 1 court, the grandpère of all the courts, that will become our 8th criminal court, and that should be finished by the end of this month, and our 8th criminal judge will fit into that complex. We've also automated some of the processes of the Supreme Court. It isn't working perfectly yet, but I don't know of a system that works perfectly from day one. When we came to government, sir, the use of technology, while it was there, it still wasn't where it needed to be. And one of the things that we did was to set up a system called Apex, which allows for electronic filing of cases. And what do we mean by electronic filing? In the, I could almost say, olden days, you had a case to be filed, people had to swear affidavits, they had to walk over to the court with the clerk, stand before somebody, swear the affidavit, often go back to the law office, then the clerk had to bring back the documents to be filed, you had to file them and wait and get them stamped and so on. We've eliminated that process so that a person is now able to file all of their court documents electronically. So we've taken that out of the system. We still have a ways to go in terms of getting that system right, but that is being addressed as we speak. But the point is, where we need to be, what we're working assiduously towards, is a situation where documents are filed electronically. A lot of the case management can be done electronically. The one good and bad thing about Zoom, sir, is that it has caused a reliance on technology that has a good side and a bad side. We've found that, and the rules have always have provided for this since around 2003 or so, when the new rules came into place, which allows you to do matters remotely. So a lot of times when lawyers appear before the CCJ, they don't fly to Trinidad. They sit at their computer and they do it. And so one of the things about Zoom is that it has allowed us to do a lot of that. There's a downside to that though, and the Chief Justice has met with us, and we are agreeing to move back to face-to-face hearings. And if you will allow me just to digress in this way, one of the things that helps young lawyers to become really good lawyers is by seeing other good lawyers work. But when you're doing that by Zoom, you don't get to see any of that, because the Zoom thing is just for the participants. And we've lost some of that training ground that young lawyers being at court and so on, and I'm happy that we're able to get back to that. So technology is another important element. In terms of where we go from here, we're trying to improve how the courts work by giving them additional staff. There was a time when judges had to sit down and write every word that was said. I've seen it. It's been a very torturous process. If you had to write every word that I say, I can only talk as fast as you can write. Years ago, when former AG and then Chief Justice, when he became Chief Justice, we set up a system of CAT reporters. That technology has changed now from CAT reporters, and we are now using voice to text. So a voice to text system, we've got overseas funding, and that system is actually being implemented as we speak. That will cut down on a lot of the time. So as lawyers speak, argue, witnesses give evidence, it is recorded, and immediately it gets converted to voice to text. But the challenge with voice to text is that you need to test it. You need to check it. Every time even though you may train your computer, I'm sure that if you dictate something and look back at it, you really find some unusual things in there that you did not intend to say, or certainly did not intend to write. So we've just given the registration department, I think is about 10 scopists. Scopists are the individuals who take what has been transcribed and checks it against what is said, so that we have an accurate record of the proceedings. That certainly is going to go a long way. Now, the challenge is that we have to ramp up that capacity very quickly, because we keep adding judges, but we haven't been adding those additional services. So we are catching up by adding the number of scopists that are required. The other thing that we're doing to help the system go through quickly is by appointing a deputy registrar whose only responsibility will be for the criminal courts. Currently, Mr. Chairman, we have a registrar, and the registrar has two deputies. And then you have a number of assistant registrars. But those registrars, the registrar and the deputy registrars, have to deal with all of the administration of the courts. They also deal with probate, estates, and so on. And then they also have to manage the Court of Appeal, as well as manage the criminal courts. We've agreed to establish the post of Deputy Registrar Criminal, so that all of the matters, as long as it relates to the criminal court, there's a dedicated registrar whose responsibility will be to deal with those criminal matters. So I hope that I've given you some insight into how we are looking to speed up the delivery of justice. But at the end of the day, when the rubber hits the road, judges need to give decisions faster. I called for it, I complained about it when I was in opposition, and I will not resile from that position now. I can say that by adding additional judges, we have seen a faster delivery of some decisions. But that tends to be because the particular judges have been working fast. We have, in recent weeks, we have a number of cases that were filed quickly, and we've got very quick decisions. No, to be fair, if you spread out the volume of work over more people, you get it faster as well. And I think in this chamber you might recall that there have been a number of pieces of litigation that have gone through the system quickly. I would remind the chamber of the cases arguing about the constitutionality of the COVID directives. Filed, heard, and on appeal. The cases dealing with the elections. Filed, heard, and on appeal. Now, you may say that those were urgent cases, so you had to get them done quickly. But you can only get them done quickly based on the manpower that you have available. So I'm happy to say that by increasing the number of judges in the way that we have, by allowing a cadre of criminal judges to focus only on criminal matters and not to have to switch back and forth, because that's what they did. They used to do criminal for 6 months and then come back and do civil. So I think, sir, that we've made some important strides in helping the system along, but we are nowhere near where we need to be. Every system in the world complains about delay. If you read the London Times, if you read the New York Times, every system has delay. It is the nature of the delivery of justice. But I do believe, sir, that despite our strides, we can do better.
Thank you, Attorney General. I want to move to another topic now, and that is the Forensic Science Center. The Forensic Science Center, as you would know, Mr. Chairman, is the place where science, medicine, and law collide. And it obviously was built because it was a greatly needed service and facility. And I want to ask if you could give us an update of how you're managing the Forensic Science Center and what future plans for any expansion you have, because it's also related to the original question as well, because obviously forensic science has played a major role in criminal investigation, and then by extension, I would imagine, could speed up how quickly trial matters are dispatched. So if you could give us an update as to where you are with the Forensic Science Center and what future plans you may have for any expansion or any additional services you may have for the center.
Thank you, Member for Christchurch West. I propose to allow the director of the Forensic Sciences Center to say some words on exactly where we are. The Forensic Sciences Center was established probably around 2003, I think, Ms. Gorman? 2003. It was grant financing from the EU. And at the time, we had great hopes for the Forensic Sciences Center. In fact, in the lead up to Cricket World Cup 2008, we were preparing the Forensic Sciences Center to become WADA accredited. So it would be one of the places in the world where the World Anti-Doping Association would send samples. But we have been plagued with difficulty. I asked for a summary of how much money we have spent on the Forensic Sciences Center in the last 10 years. We have spent just about $1 million in remedial or repair work on the Forensic Sciences Center every year for the last 10 years. And we've had to close the facility because of environmental challenges. And this has obviously meant that we've been unable to service the Barbados Police Service in terms of their more critical needs. And we've, in fact, had to resort back to using laboratories overseas. But if you would allow, I'll ask Ms. Corbin to give you a clear understanding of some of the challenges that the center has had. But the current position is that it is not now serviceable. We spent a lot of money on it, but we still aren't there. The one wonderful addition, though, that we have been able to utilize is the engagement of a forensic pathologist And the good thing about what he does is that you could do that in many different locations, and so he's been working. Ms. Corbin?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Chair. What I would like to say, first of all, is that, yes, it is not that the...
Officer, you just need to give your name.
Forgive me,
Thank you.
sorry. My name is Cheryl Corbin, and I am the Director of the Forensic Sciences Center under the Office of the Attorney General. What I would like to make clear to the sitting here is that the problem that we have been experiencing is not that with the skill set of the scientists or the ability to do forensic science. What it is the difficulties with the plant, the difficulties with the building. Because all of the environmental challenges that we have been having, what needs to be made very clear is that there is no way that we are going to impact or in any way affect the integrity of any evidence that we put forward by working in an environment that is not appropriate for what we need to do. Because if we do that and we produce certificates in areas where the airflow is not appropriate and that there is mold or whatever other negative, impactful situation there is, what will happen is that when we produce that certificate, it can be contested because then they're going to say that we are not using good laboratory practice and we're not working along the accreditation lines and so on and so forth. So that is one of the main challenges that we have had as it relates to not being able to support the Barbados Police Service fully. However, during all of the downtime, and the Office of the Attorney General has been very attentive and they have done as much as they can physically do, and they keep working to get us. We've recently got a new chiller, and we're having monitoring systems put in and the other remedial works that have to be done. And hopefully, I am keeping my fingers crossed that we can be back in the building fully within another 2 months, hopefully. Once that is done, then we have a very aggressive coming back online program for the actual analyses of the cases or the exhibits that the police service would be submitting. Now, in the interim, well, I should say it wasn't easy, but what we were able to achieve is that, one, we constantly kept our evidence area secured so we can assure the police and the ministry and the public that any evidence that we have received prior to us shutting down, the integrity of that evidence has been maintained, sealed, double sealed, packed, and we know where everything is because of the database tracking system that we use. Secondly, where narcotics cases are concerned, because at least 80% of the cases that go through magistrates' courts are of a narcotics nature or gun-related firearms nature, we have been able to secure a small lab space on our ground floor where we continue to be able to work the narcotics cases so that those will at least be able to continue to go into court and we don't have the holdups for that. Prior, however, to our shutting down, our scientists would have done trace investigations for a number of the murders, sexual offenses cases, and what we are presently doing, we are working with the DPP's office to reconcile the cases that they have on the docket right now to be able to see which would be priority. Well, it is all priority, so I'm not being facetious about that, but how we will triage these cases when we actually get back on the floor. Okay, we're presently working with the DPP's office on that. And some of the murder cases, we have already done the trace investigation work, and some of the cases are actually being heard and completed and so on. So I just want to be able to say, Mr. Chair, respectfully, that even though on the surface, the general public says the lab not working, that's not really true. We do have aspects that we can still complete. What we try to do, if there are cases that the police service needs to have done quickly. We work with them to be able to identify a laboratory overseas that could probably assist in what they have to do. But going forward, what we're hoping is that once we get back online, within a period of 6 to 8 months, we will be able to at least be 80 to 90% back to full capacity. Because please bear in mind, because the building has been down and the majority of the instruments have been down, they need now to be calibrated and get back for the accuracy and specificity that is required to be able to do our analyses. So I certainly hope that that has clarified the situation a tad.
Thank you, ma'am, for that explanation. And I too look forward to when the center is back at full capacity. Clearly, as you would appreciate, I've been following quite closely the work of forensics, and particularly the forensic case that was recently, resolved on it, as related to the forensic bite case. But I won't get into that. But you did also mention the use of firearms. And a lot of your work obviously is done with firearms. And that leads me into my next question, Mr. Chairman, and it has to do with the truce that you were able to broker through your ministry and the member for the city of Bridgetown. And I would ask if the honourable member, either the Attorney General or the member for the city of Bridgetown, to give us an update as to what you were able to put together in terms of that truce and what future plans you have for that truce, and congratulate you as well on the work that you were able to do with that matter. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I propose to allow Mr. Lane to respond.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member for Christchurch West. Just want to make it abundantly clear that in relation to the truth, this ministry has not been working directly with that. What we've been doing, as we would have proposed and presented already, is working with certain NGOs who will be producing that type of work. I want to say at the outset that we working with an organization called Inspire. We continue to work with them and any other organization doing good work in this particular field. The other thing I want to make abundantly clear as well as it relates to guns on the street, that obviously would be the role of the Barbados Police Service to ensure that they have a plan in relation to firearms on the streets. So just in that brief way, I would like to respond. I don't know if the AG will get the commissioner to speak to what their plans are that they can discuss in public.
Well, I'd come to the commissioner at a later stage, but as Ms. Lynn said, we've not been involved in any way in the brokering of any truce.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back to you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Let me remind all parties, we need you to speak directly into the mic for the benefit of the Hansard reporters who would wish to hear quite clearly, and so that they can get the record of the proper record of the responses. Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to the Attorney General's office. I want to start by thanking you for the sometimes thankless job you have, but you are a critical part of what helps to keep our society safe and keep it strong. There are a couple of items that are on my mind this morning in relation to the job that you have to do. And it starts from a comment made by the Honourable Member for St. Joseph when he first started, when he said that policing comes after the fact, and that if we're going to keep law and order in Barbados, it has to be kept from the heart. It has to be kept by the citizens. Citizens have to manage themselves. There is no way for the police to make crime go away if the partners that you have in your ecosystem are not all doing the work that they need to do to train up our children so that they have the values and the behaviors that make for a good society. If you don't have the proper accountability within your not only legal system, your economic system, your community system, where we hold people accountable for what they're supposed to do. Because if you let people break the law and get rid of it, it encourages others to so do. So these are things to me that are absolutely necessary for us to be able to build the type of society that there can be peace and security for everyone. My question pertains to how does that legal and justice ecosystem, how are all of the partners within that system functioning to help us move towards the goal of being able to create a society that is safe and a society that is just? By that ecosystem, I'm talking about courts, and I believe the Honourable Member was speaking about some of the improvements they've been trying to make in relation to the courts, in relation to things like parenting, in relation to the media as well. One of the things that is of concern to me is the notion that we can put anything out there in the social space which can have an impact, an effect on people's values and judgments when we glorify certain negative behaviors and then feel that another part of the society should clean up the mess created by that irresponsible behavior. So I wanted to find out what is being done in relation to mobilizing all of the partners in the ecosystem to help us all work consistently towards the goal of a just and safe society.
Thank you for framing the question in that very interesting way. I would like to begin by reminding that very often when something happens, members of the society are very quick to point fingers and to lay blame. And unfortunately, the Attorney General, whose shoulders are broad, gets a fair amount of that blame. The police, the first question you hear is, what are the police doing? And we should pass a law against this and so on. And that kind of sentiment comes from a place where it says that somebody else is responsible for what has gone wrong. It never comes from a place where we begin by acknowledging that we are all partners in the exercise of keeping the ship of state afloat, and keeping it not just afloat, but stable and a good place for everybody. And therefore, I really appreciate the context in which you've put the question. And perhaps it isn't even that the question itself is important, but that we begin by recognizing that it is not about the police. The people, nobody calls the police the day before to say, I feel so-and-so got a gun. If you ask the commissioner how many times that happens, he may tell you occasionally. But they will run to the phone, they will see all kinds of things happening. Never think for a moment, I have a role to play in helping to stem or helping to prevent something from happening. But they'll be the first body to, after the videotape it, of course, to call to say, in fact, some may say, you call like videotaping. And that's the society that we find ourselves in. We want to blame the church, we want to blame the school. We don't want to blame ourselves because somehow or another we are not responsible. But what that tells us is that we really need to have a whole of government approach. And perhaps that the Office of the Attorney General is not necessarily the place to lead that whole of government approach. I remember when we first came to government and we recognized that there was a tremendous uptick in gun violence, and I believe I'm quite sure you were there. We had, for the first time in our history, a national security briefing for all of Cabinet, and then we had another national security briefing for all of Parliament, including the opposition, and then we went a step further and had a national security briefing for all of the senior public servants. Because we understood then that it was irrational to approach this in a segmented way, and that every single ministry, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Sports, every single ministry had a role to play in helping us to stem this emerging trend. And there was a big meeting, I think, chaired by the Prime Minister at Lloyd Erskine, so that each department of government could say, this is how I intend to contribute to the exercise. But you'll notice that we can only control or attempt to control what happens within government. The civil society has a role to play, and in fact, I owe the faith-based community an apology, because they did write to me towards the end of last year to say that they wanted to have a meeting with me to be able to discuss what they were seeing, what they recognize as a surge in violent gun crime in particular. And well, you know how it goes. Time challenges have made it difficult, but I've committed to meeting with them in very short order, because the faith-based community, they recognize that they have a role to play. It may not be a role that covers all of Barbados or all at the same time, but they have a role to play. I get reports every day of our school children engaging in horrendous behavior. Sometimes it makes its way to social media, but I know school children who are carrying to school razor blades, and they're in first form, so you know they can't shave. They carry to school pen knives. They carry to school dice. No, I don't know. Some of us probably carry school dice and cards, but we know that was for recreational purposes and generally at the end of term. So our educators, yes, but no teacher packs a child's school bag. They don't. I have to hope that a parent packs that school bag, or at least checks to see what's going in it. So you ask how the partners are working. We are perhaps at the beginning stage of something that if we don't grapple with it now, it will get worse. We think it's bad now, it will get worse. We look at homicide statistics, and we see that last year, and I have the statistics, I think we had, I can give it to you in just a second, but I think we had 43 last year. And we had a lower number the year before that, and I think then we had 28. Sorry, we had 48 in the year prior. Let me just get those statistics up. I don't want to give you misinformation. Last year we had 35. Last year we had 35 homicides, 26 by gun. The year before, 32, 17 by gun. The year before that, 2020, 41, and the year before that, 48. In 2018, we had 28. Now, numbers tell an interesting story, but numbers is not the story in itself. In 1987, we had 27 homicides. 1987. And in 2018, you can do the math, decades later, we were still holding at around 28. Something happened to cause this spike. Now, there are some people who will want to attribute it to all kinds of things, but let me say this. This is not a Barbados phenomenon. This is a regional phenomenon, and Minister Lane, Memphis City, when he spoke, mentioned statistics, and he said, I heard him quite clearly, this is not to say that some are better than us or we're not as bad as anybody else. But statistics tell that story. And permit me to share some other statistics with you. Because when you look at what's happening in the region, that too tells a story. In Turks and Caicos, their homicide rate for last year was 77.6 per 100,000. Turks and Caicos. Jamaica was 52.9 per 100,000. St. Lucia, 42.3 per 100,000. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 40.7 per 100,000. Trinidad and Tobago, 39.4 per 100,000. Bahamas, 32 per 100,000. Belize, 25 per 100,000. Barbados and Guyana, 15 per 100,000. Now, the statisticians will say, well, Turks and Caicos population is small, so, the numbers, the percentage would always seem big. But the point I want to make is, Mr. Chairman, we recognize that exactly what has been happening in Barbados has been happening in all of the other countries in the region. Last year, St. Lucia had almost 70 homicides, and the population of St. Lucia is probably less than 200,000. And they had almost 70 homicides to deal with in their small country. The leaders of CARICOM have recognized that that this is more than just trying to find out what's happening in Barbados. And so, under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Rowley of Trinidad and Tobago, in next month, the CARICOM will have a special heads of government meeting with one agenda item, looking at the problem of violence in the Caribbean and treating violence as a public health problem. We've applied public health solutions to COVID, to a whole variety of other issues, and while we're not going to quarantine people to stop crime, but we have to take first a regional approach and see exactly what is happening. And we already have an idea of what some of these factors are. So I know that I've digressed a little bit away from where we started, but if I can come back, it is a partnership that we require. The government, we can throw as much money at the issue of crime, at the issue of violence in our communities as we want. We can. But unless those communities themselves see that they have a role to play as a partner, unless those parents see that they have a role to play as a partner with the teachers, the faith-based groups, they see that they have a role to play as a partner with other people, we simply run the risk of this situation spiraling out of control. We are putting the resources behind it, but if nothing else, Minister, we have to recognize that a partnership is what is required. And those partners know who they are. They're the parents, they're the uncles, they're the aunts. But it's also the gentleman who is at the bus stop, who can have a word with somebody else. A curious thing happened some months ago. There was a call-in program. I'm going to be very careful how I speak on this issue, but there was a call-in program that one caller called in to say that a teenage boy had been asked to take off his mask in a van. An adult asked him to take off his mask in the van, and he refused. Turns out that adult was a police officer who asked the bus driver, if I recall the facts correctly, asked this young man to take off his mask. The young man refused. The police officer then, he was off duty and out of uniform. He then summoned police officers to address the situation of this young man. Now, there have been a number of different views as to who should have done what, who was wrong, and who was right. But I reflect on being a teenage boy. They weren't called ZRs then, they were called pickups. I reflect on being a teenage boy in a pickup. And I know that had an adult asked me to do something what my response would have been. Had the driver asked me to do something, a similar response would have been demanded. Had a policeman asked me to do something, well, Lord knows, okay? But we had a society that tied up the calling program for 2 days trying to work out who right and who wrong. The police was wrong, the this body was wrong. And you know, we're the fundamentals. How does a 15-year-old boy take such a defiant position that when you discover it's actually a policeman, you still don't oblige with the legitimate request?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I really appreciated that response. I will be glad to hear more about the regional cooperation as well. So if you get a chance on another occasion, I'll be glad to hear what we're doing, because I really believe it is one of the things that we have to do if we're going to deal with this. My second question then relates to the other half of this situation, that we have to have an ecosystem that is working together, the whole of government approach as you have described it, and everybody has to play a part, not to be pointing and criticizing, but what can I do? The issue of volunteering is going to be important. We need people in the Boy Scouts, the Girl Guides. We need people to get back out and help us shape the society that we want Barbados to be. On the other side of that is the issue of rebuilding trust within our society, because at the same time that we've had the deterioration in the social fabric, the behavior of some of our young people and some of our older people too, while you've had that deterioration, at the same time there has been a loss of trust in the legal system, a loss of trust in politicians and government officials, a loss of trust in a lot of the institutions that are important for keeping the society functioning. And when that happens, it really allows and emboldens those who do not wish to conform. They use that as the reason why they do not conform to the very legitimate requirements of living in a society. So my question is, what are some of the things that you feel we need to do to be able to rebuild trust in our legal system, trust in our police? What is happening in relation to accountability, that when something goes wrong within the system, how can the citizens be sure that we are dealing with it in a fair and upright way? And then one that is of concern to me, because I know the continuing degradation within a society will eventually lead to a situation where police can come under physical attack, and they can also become targets where they can be enticed to either look the other way or get involved in corruption, etc. And these things are of concern to me. So my question, how are we going to rebuild the trust, and what are the systems that are being put in place to ensure the accountability within the system so that citizens can again feel that they can fully trust their legal system and their police system as an important part of keeping our society whole?
Thank you, Minister. And I propose to allow the Commissioner to weigh in on this, but if I can just offer a few precatory remarks. The notion of a society being able to function where there's no confidence in the police service is just not one that we could countenance. Law enforcement has to be trusted. And if you just follow some of the developments in the US in particular, where you have very highly publicized incidences of what could be described as wrongdoing by the police, and you look at the reaction of the police, of the populace, you can begin to sense the kind of instability that could take place. And those are cities with millions of people. Imagine little Barbados. So there's no doubt, logically, anecdotally, however you want to through whatever eyes you want to look at it, there's no doubt that trust and confidence in law enforcement is vital if they're going to be able to get their work done. And you know, we set up, when we were last in government, I had the privilege of being the Attorney General at that time, the Police Complaints Authority. Because at that point, the only body that you could complain to about the police was the police. And we recognize that's not a system that engenders confidence. And therefore, we needed to put an independent body in place to be able to do it. That legislation was passed, the body was set up. Its first chairman, I remember well, was Mr. Justice, retired Leroy Innes, who did a wonderful job. The work of that very small body should be lauded. We are going to be reviewing its legislation very shortly because we believe that there are some added things, some added powers that they need to have. But I do think that particular body has been doing a very good job. They get a large number of reports, and everybody is not going to be satisfied with the outcome. But I understand that sometimes people only really want to have a hearing, to have a feeling that there's an opportunity to vent. And sometimes you just want to hear somebody say, I'm sorry. So that body has been one of the agencies, has been one of the methods that we use to try to reinforce the confidence in the police service, because people have an understanding that there's an avenue that they can approach to redress any challenges. The other one is, that I'd like to mention, is technology-based. We've seen how body cameras have been important in establishing the truth of what happened. Often when complaints are made against the police service for things, let us say the police bust into a place, you will often get conflicting versions of what happened. And I remember being awakened one morning about something that happened in in Nelson Street. And the version of the people who were in the bar was completely different to the version of the police officers who were the ones who went and did the exercise. And it happens all the time. The wearing by police officers of body cameras helps to solve that particular problem, because we are not anymore relying on what somebody said. We have real-time video footage of exactly what happened, and in many instances we will have footage from multiple angles, which help to establish the truth. Because the point about the truth is it doesn't belong to any one person. Often people hear that this is what happened and they get riled up too. Because all we in this together. And sometimes they even say, I see it, man. They didn't even see nothing. But the point is that when you have video footage and audio, you don't call that footage, right? When you have an audio file of exactly what happened, then it makes it harder for untruths to get ahead. Whether that untruth comes from the mouth of the police or whether it comes from the mouth of the civilian. The point is, our only interest is in establishing what actually happened so that an impartial judgment can be made. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. One of the confidence building measures that we have employed is by equipping the police service with several hundred body cams so that as they go and do their operations, footage will be captured of what they did right or wrong, so that if a complaint is sustainable, then the person who makes the complaint can be satisfied that there's an impartial, accurate record of what happened. And if the complaint is unsustainable, then they'll be able to say, well, we'll be able to say, well, this is the video footage that we have of what happened, and we therefore don't find this officer responsible. It allows for speedy resolution, it allows for accurate resolution, and that is a very important confidence building measure. If I can ask, with your leave, Mr. Chairman, the Commissioner, to respond to this issue of building confidence building and maintaining confidence in the police service.
My name is Richard Boyce, Commissioner of Police. Now, the whole aspect of building trust in the organization, first let me say, when the police service operates in a participative society, and we know full well that persons need look for justice when any wrongs have been committed. Now, in terms of how we build that trust, when persons make complaints to us, when persons feel offended or their rights have been trampled. And one of the ways that we can address that is make sure that persons, when they make complaints to us, they're dealt with in a swift manner. Persons are told and informed on a regular basis of what is happening, how things are progressing. I think persons become frustrated when reports of uncivilized behavior or whatever the complaint is to an entity such as the police service. And days or probably months go by and there's no response, no updates. It seems to fracture the type of engagement which they have with the police, and also the trust of the police also between that citizen and the police. That is one area that we can address to really bring that trust back up to the level that we want it to be. Now, one of our core values is the whole aspect of integrity. When persons interact with the police, make complaints to the police or make reports, we expect that those reports will be handled in such a way that they can see that justice is being done. Restorative justice, whatever justice they're looking for. And we go down that road and make sure that we do everything within our power to be transparent and persons can see, well, there's no cover-up. Everything is in the open. So when persons see that that is the way that the force is operating, then that would bring the type of confidence in the police, not only to that person, but other persons who are looking on in society will say, well, if I am wrong by the police, or if I do something, or if the police do something to me, which I believe is unjustified, that it will be handled in a quick way, and necessary steps will be taken to make sure that the person who have created that infraction is being disciplined. And discipline is one of the hallmarks of the organization also. When these reports are made to us, persons who are well trained to investigate these matters, and if the complaint is proved to be correct, then that complaint is followed through also. That is a trial to be heard, and a decision is to be made one way or the other. The person also is told exactly what is the outcome of the case, and that does a lot to the confidence of persons in the police service. Know that there are these guards, safeguards in place to make sure that when things are reported even to the police complaints department. Those things are actioned in a timely fashion. So there are systems in place to make sure that citizens can feel satisfied that these things are happening, and that would push the organization forward and also maintain that level of support from members of the public where trust is concerned.
Thank you, Commissioner. If you could just touch on the other part of the question as well for me, because my concern too is about the safety of officers, because with a more hostile environment, increasing hostility, it puts that police officer at risk. We live in a small community, people get to know where you live. And I wanted to know, because I know that you've been doing a lot in terms of equipment, what is being put in place to be able to protect them as they go about this job in terms of your bulletproof vest, your body armor, you know, the weapons they have and the training that you give them in order to be safe.
Sure, in terms of safety of police officers, as mentioned by the Attorney General, we are living in interesting times in the sense that persons are making the job more difficult for the police to make it, put it simply. And because of the access of certain weapons, people access to weapons is a threat to our safety. Weapons, whether it is firearm, whether it is knives, whatever it is, we are conscious of those things. And because we realize what types of weapons people are using, we have achieved or obtained a number of well-made or accredited body wear to protect our officers from certain caliber of bullets, which are out there now. So the vests, bulletproof vests that we have now, they are recommended by the accredited persons that these are the type of vests that we should be carrying. And we only 2 weeks, in fact, last week, we received 50 of those vests for officers. And we have another 50 on order, and we will move away from all of the vests which we have for the past 3 years. And those vests now will come in handy, so our officers will feel more secure when they go out there and what they're going to face if they come into a firing line or whatever. So yes, we have the equipment coming on board now, and persons already are embracing them and they're utilizing them, especially those officers who operate at the tip of the spear out there in the fields. So those things are in place. We also changing out a lot of our equipment, bring more into contemporary times in terms of whether it's a taser guns or whatever it is. We have those things coming on board now, coming on stock. So yes, we are forward thinking in terms of how best we protect our officers, and it's working quite well. So in the start of next financial year, I should say, we're going to have a number of equipment at our disposal whereby our officers can feel safe and satisfied that if they come up against whatever it is, they feel well satisfied and settled in mind that they can repel any attack and feel comfortable that they're being protected.
I'm very pleased to hear that, and I don't regret the monies our ministry would have had to give up to allow you to get some more money to be able to make sure that our officers are safe, because if they don't feel safe, they're not going to do the job, and it is a tough one. My last question has to do with community policing. Yesterday, I was in a conversation with other citizens, and the issue of community policing came up. What was amazing was how, for them, this was how they had interacted with police. And they had wonderful things to say about that program. I myself have seen it in action, where you chose persons suited for that type of engagement. And they made a big difference in a lot of communities. They really did. Because they were present, young people and children had the opportunity to engage them. Some of them performed the role of father, protector. There was one police officer who would even take his money and purchase fish for children that they could have that for supper when they went home. That was how engaged those police officers were. And I want to congratulate you on that program when it was running. My disappointment is that we were not able to maintain it. I truly believe that the program that the Honourable Member for the city, what he's going to put in place is going to be important. I'm just wondering if there are any plans to include community policing to help rebuild that positive relationship between the police and the citizens. Please, I really hope you have some money for that. If you don't do it this year, please promise me next year.
Thank you, Chair. I can assure you that the last estimates or discussion, we've had funds set aside to boost the whole rollout of community policing. And that is a biggie in the year going forward. And already we have identified some persons to form community officers. That group of persons to go into various districts. For one, we'll be looking at Oxnard, Haynesville area, looking at Silver Hill, a number of districts we already identified, and persons will be going in those districts, meeting with persons, forming that bonding association, and also directing them along a particular path whereby they can have positive lifestyles and even get some of those same persons coming into the organization. So it is something that I have the main players who are currently in the program leading in that area, and they're well advanced of having this rollout. So yes, you asked, that is there, it is there, I can assure you, and no doubt things are looking very, very good going forward.
Thank you very much for that, and I just want to offer my congratulations to the force on the appointment of the two ladies in the north. I was very impressed with them, and I wish them all the best in their endeavors to help work to bring peace and security to Barbados. So please pass on my congratulations to both of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. James South. Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of, well, no, actually, 3 questions. The first one has to do with morale in the Barbados Police Service. So let me just indicate the context within which I am asking the question. Police officers do a job that I would not do. That kind of danger constantly is not for me. I've also had the experience of losing a schoolmate who's a police officer, went to secondary school with me, right through school. Many years ago, trying to apprehend a person, I think in the Passage Road area, Marlon Marville. Some may remember the name. And then I had another more recent, really heart-wrenching scenario where my friend and neighbor, Newton Lewis, lost his life. And actually I had to, well, one of the bullets went through the home of part of the home of my parents. Now, it is in that context and interacting with police officers pretty frequently where I recognize that beside the training and the provision of equipment, there is need for persons who are in those kinds of stressful situations and dangerous situations to have more than the training and the equipment. And the question I have is, what is the Barbados Police Service either doing or contemplating with respect to preparing officers for the challenges that they face, and then working with them while they're facing these challenges to ensure that they are capable, not just physically and through equipment, but mentally to handle these situations. There are persons who, police officers don't do a lot of talking because we understand there's national security, but I know that there are persons out there, particularly those, the increasing number of persons who are concerned about mental wellness, who are concerned that maybe not all of those who have to face this kind of danger are prepared, but also on a continuing basis in a position to be able to face it. So that is the essence of my first question, if I haven't confused everybody.
Thank you, Member for St. Peter. I'd like to ask the Commissioner if he would weigh in by way of response.
Mr. Chairman, what I can say is the police service, they have a program in place, a wellness program in place to address these issues that no doubt being the type of work that we are involved in, the whole aspects of the risks involved in the drug, the trauma which is involved in the job, and other things that can happen, incidents that can happen, that can make life much more difficult for police officers, both physically and mentally. And because of that, we have social programs such as interaction with network services, also with counselors who, outside of that, counselors who we can call anytime, day or night, to bring them on board. Because we find that when persons are exposed to these unfortunate situations, we find that any breakage, length in time before the interventioner comes on board is a problem for us. So we have a 24-hour program for these persons when they are traumatized. Now, you mentioned two well-publicized incidents involving deaths of police officers. And when such incidents occur, it affects not only the organization, but you're looking at the multiplying factors. That is the families, friends, and society in general. So the impact is tremendous for us and for society when these things happen. So we have the churches on board also where that is concerned, to maintain the morale of the force, because irrespective of what happened, the show must go on. And taking the show on means that the persons who remain must be in the frame of mind also to perform and perform at the highest point, highest quality, because the highest quality police service is not what we aspired for. So that is something that is pushed over and over. And when we have that type of energy in the organization, you find that it is contagious. So persons who may be lacking in one area, whether depression or lethargic or whatever, we find that the energy of the persons who recover from these situations, because some persons will recover more quickly than other persons. So it is the involvement, the energy of the persons who are stronger will always be around to help other persons come along. So it is that type of bonding, that type of expression of sympathy, that social awareness that we have in the organization is a big factor for keeping the morale, the spirits high in the organization. It is working, and we make sure that the persons who deliver that type of training, that type of intervention for us, are always contacted, and feedback from them also plays a major part for us, because when our members attend sessions with those persons, we get the feedback for them, from those persons. So we know anything coming up in the future, we know what to do. Certain things are triggered, whereby the morale will be maintained, and things will flow as we would like them to flow.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to understand the seriousness with which the service takes that kind of preparation. I used to think before I became an adult, when you look at police officers, that they were big, strong, and that nothing could faze them. And then you become an adult and you speak to other adults and you realize that they are human beings. It was kind of surprising at first. Didn't realize that they were human beings like the rest of us. But I'm happy for the...
Honourable member, before you go on, I'm hearing a cell phone. Please put your cell phones on silent. Please, thank you. Honourable member, proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much. The second question I have has to do with crime prevention. And I applaud the efforts being made so far in this matter. There is sometimes, and I'm not saying this because of any knowledge of where the minister, the Attorney General is going, where they are going with the program, but there is sometimes the feeling, particularly from those in rural constituencies and parishes like the one I represent, St. Peter, that the focus is on what could be considered hot spots. And the concern that persons in rural communities have is that a focus on hot spots that may not be in rural areas sometimes could cause persons who are defiant to migrate to rural areas. And I hear from constituents that from time to time they get the feeling that we might be opening ourselves up to activity that is not known to be part of the fabric of rural communities. And so the question is, how is the ministry intending to address those known areas, or areas that may be known or referred to as hot spots, while not neglecting rural areas so that we don't end up transferring challenges? I just want to know what is in the mind of those who lead in that area.
Mr. Chairman, I propose to ask the Commissioner to weigh in on this, but I would begin by saying that some years ago I felt that my own constituency, St. Joseph, was the kind of area that you were just describing, largely idyllic, without any challenges. And then, member for St. Peter, we began to have challenges. And I reminded myself that a firearm is only a bus ride away from Horse Hill. And, you know, our reality is that Barbados is a small country, and there's always somebody who is related to somebody who lives in Tree Hill, or Horse Hill, or Gun Hill, or someplace like that, that might represent a source of tranquility for a person in a hot spot, or a person running from a hot spot. I want to say that I do believe, and I let the Commissioner elaborate, that Barbados is fully policed, it is adequately policed, and as an MP for a rural constituency like yourself, I am very concerned to make sure that rural Barbados receives its fair share of the policing cake. But our reality is that we have limited resources, and we have to apply those resources to where often the need is greatest. We have put a lot of attention into mapping crime so that we know exactly where these hotspots are and who are associated with these hotspots. And while I feel your angst, I would like to assure you as a colleague minister that in no circumstance will I ever accept that St. Peter or St. Lucie or St. Joseph or any other rural part of Barbados will fall short in terms of how we are adequately policed. There are some numbers that we have to look at. So for example, as part of the police analysis, in terms of the allocation of resources, they know exactly how many people they have to police in St. Andrew. I think, Commissioner, the latest number would have been in the parish of St. Andrew, no, not the constituency of St. Andrew, would have been just over 6,000. And we know the number for St. Joseph. But when we look at the statistics for St. Michael, for example, we know that St. Michael polices, the policing of St. Michael requires the policing of, in the region of 88. Yeah, the most densely populated parish, St. Michael, 88,000, Christchurch, 54,000, St. Philip, 30,000. This document goes on to say the parishes of St. Andrew, 5,139, St. Joseph, 6,600, St. John, 8,963, St. Lucie, 9,700, St. Peter, a little bit more, 11,000. So those are the kinds of analysis that we have to go into when we are looking at how we allocate police resources. So we look at the numbers, but you also then look at what kind of criminal activity you've been seeing, what kind of risk there is, and so on. But those are just... Who's that? I'd like to hand over to the Commissioner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The question which was raised by Minister Jordan is one which I can sympathize with him. First, let me say, yes, we know what can happen if all of our resources are targeted to the hotspots area. But I must say to the Minister that we are also thankful for the cold spots. And St. Peter is one which is somewhat cold when it comes to crime. When it comes to crime. So you're one of the person should be standing and saying hallelujah. Nevertheless, I want to assure everyone that yes, we have our evidence to show where we should target the majority of our resources. And there are certain locations that we know that we must pay 24 hours attention to. And that is what we focus on in a big way. We know that when we do such an intervention in these areas, what can occur is what we call displacement of the criminals. And they migrate from one location to another location. Sometimes, yes, since our work is evidence-based, we know exactly what will happen, where these persons will go. And yes, some run to the north, but we have persons, what we call fielding in slips, like a cricket team. You place a fielder in a particular location because we know exactly where that person will go to. So we have improved our system of policing when it comes to looking at these hotspots. And we have persons, no, we don't operate in a vacuum. We let each division know exactly what we are doing and what we expect. Because we have to read the minds of these persons that we're going after. So we alert persons who are working, whatever location it is, look out for A, B, C. We expect this to happen and things like that. So we not only focus on the hotspot, we also, as I mentioned, cold spots also are taken into consideration. So we plan for all of these eventualities. Obviously, some person might slip through, but in time, we cover down that concern. Now, in terms of that part of the country, which was mentioned by the minister, there are one or two areas, yes, which are known to us, that we also have to pay attention to. And we know how persons can migrate from one spot to another spot, sometimes form relationships. So if a person is living in a particular parish and he becomes friendly with someone, and vice versa, that person will go in that area, and all of a sudden you find that we're having crimes being committed in a particular location. And when we do our checking, we find out that this person who was living in one parish is now living in another parish. And when we find out, by that time the person probably commit 5 or probably 10 offenses. So those are things that happen, and yes, when it happens like that, it takes a little time, so people might see a little rise in probably house breaking or burglary, as we term them. These things could happen, but we are conscious of it, and we are doing those things to let persons know. Another thing, we look to technology, whether it's media or whatever, we make sure that we alert persons when persons who are wanted. And when persons see these pictures of persons' facial shots, and whatever parish you live in or wherever vicinity it is, people can on the lookout, see this person, and again, notify the police when these persons, virtual strangers, come through their districts. The police are informed. So yes, we are mindful of what the minister is saying, and we can assure him that we have our eyes on those things also, and I can assure him again that we would put everything in place to make sure that those persons do not cause havoc in those areas such as the north or wherever it is. So that is it.
Thank you very much, and long may my cold spot continue to be cold. The final question I have, Mr. Chair, relates to the Solicitor General's chambers. In the public service, there is a particular feeling about how matters move through the SG's chambers. And I'm being deliberately cautious and careful in framing the question. I want to be productive in the question. And so what I want to find out is if there are any plans or measures that may already be put in place to cause public officers to change their view about matters that go to the Solicitor General's chambers where there is to be a response to a ministry or a department or an agency.
Thank you very much, Member for St. Peter. I will, of course, allow the Solicitor General acting to add to my response. But I'd like to begin by acknowledging that delay has come to characterize the work product of the Solicitor General's chambers. For the benefit of the public, and I hope you don't mind, but for the benefit of the public, the government has its own in-house lawyers, its own in-house legal team. There is a Solicitor General, three deputies, and then a number of other junior lawyers under them, and the total complement is just 20 attorneys at law. Let's begin by acknowledging that the legal requirements of any government is bound to be complex. One day, those lawyers may be dealing with international treaties and international obligations. Another day, they're dealing with a claim for breach of contract. Another day, they're dealing with advice to ministry on something or another. 20 lawyers to be the central legal team for government is a stretch. Now, I'm not here asking for more. I wish I could get more. But I just want to make the point that when you look across the entire panoply of government relationships and services, and I will admit that SOEs often have one or two lawyers attached to them, yes. So we know that the Ministry of the Blue Economy has a specialist maritime lawyer attached to it, and that's a wonderful thing. But you know what? Until they had that specialist maritime lawyer attached to them 4 or 5 years ago, all of those matters had to come to the SG chambers, which did not have a specialist maritime lawyer, and it therefore meant that whichever lawyer's desk it landed on, they had to morph from being whatever they were the day before, a personal injury lawyer, into a specialist maritime field, which requires a very steep learning curve. I'm not here to make excuses, but I just want to establish what the context is. So therefore, to give us 20 lawyers and say to us that we have to deal with just about all of the legal issues that arise in a complex government, and at perhaps the most complex of times, is a stretch. So that's the first thing. But I accept that there are delays. The chambers has divided itself, well, has been divided into the advisory section, and then there's the litigation section. But if we take half of those lawyers and put them in litigation, well, I think divided into 3: contracts, advisory, litigation. I'll let the Solicitor General explain. But if we divide those bodies into 3, you will then see how many lawyers you have when all of government, central government, wants contracts done. All of government wants opinions. And there are some practices that we have to change as well, because there are departments that are staffed with senior lawyers, but when they have a problem, they say, let me get an opinion from the SG's chambers. For lawyers who may not be as senior as they are, to research and write legal opinion. So we're trying to correct some of these inefficiencies. And one of the inefficiencies that we're trying hard to correct, sir, has to do with the level of training that our lawyers have. And the Solicitor General is working on putting together a number of training sessions in the current financial year. In the current financial year, the first one will probably start in another week or 2, to intensify the training that the lawyers in chambers has. But there are some defects that we have to recognize. One of the weaknesses of the civil service member for St. Peter, and that includes our lawyers, is the ability to get moved at a moment's notice. So we have some of our finest lawyers working on a contract for your ministry, perhaps. But at close of business today, they get a call, you serving as the magistrate for District F from tomorrow. And they report to District F. And they're at District F for 3 months. Now, they may already have reached a certain way in examining your ministry's particular issue, but they've been moved. So you now have to take someone and put them back to square one. There are numerous inefficiencies about how government works that plague us. I'd be the first to say that while I want to see our lawyers moved and have opportunities to get new skills and for promotion and so on, the way in which we do it does not redound to the benefit of the public service in terms of our ability to do service delivery. So there are some realities that we have to face. I deeply apologize, but you know, we do the best we can with what we have. But let me ask the SG acting to add to my response.
Thank you, AG. Thank you, Honourable Minister. My name is Anika Jackson. I am the Acting Solicitor General. The question is really in relation to delays, and in particular, in relation, from what I understand, to the ministries and responses to the ministries. Now, as the AG has said, it is undeniable that there are delays in the system. We are understaffed, under-resourced. We're not making any excuses. We are divided into 3 sections, as the AG just said: advisory, contracts and international law, and litigation. That means that basically we have 6 persons per section, including the head of section. Now, I must say that in recent times, the delays in this regard have been significantly reduced. Almost every request received by chambers is deemed urgent, and we treat same with the necessary urgency as far as possible. There is noted improvement even in relation to answering and returning phone calls. It may seem like something small, but it is quite significant, as well as correspondence, including emails. It is noteworthy, and I think this will interest everyone present, that we now also welcome the submission of requests electronically in the interest of time. I must, however, point out that a major contributor to the delays is the continued submission of requests at the very last minute, only when they have, most of the time, only when they have become urgent. When we look at the information, a lot of times we are getting requests that are based on cabinet decisions that were made months prior to the requests being made of us, which are now urgent. This is often compounded by a lack of detailed instructions and background information, so that again contributes to the delays. The ministries and departments, we're asking again and again, must submit adequate and clear information, example, policy decisions regarding the matters which we are asked to address. We also need our clients at the ministries and departments to help us help them. The performance indicators, I think, they're relevant here. The number of new court matters has reduced significantly over the last year from 116 to 77. However, the number of incoming files from ministries, and that's incoming files, note that I said that we do receive a lot of work now electronically, via email. But the number of incoming files from ministry has increased from 399 to 432 over the last year. In speaking about delays, I also think that we should speak about backlog, because again, it is undeniable that we have quite a bit of backlog. It is actively being worked on. We have embarked on a backlog project to clear and settle all long-standing personal injury matters. It must, however, be understood, again, that there are a number of attendant factors. In a lot of the cases, unreasonable, highly inflated, quantified claims submitted by private counsel. In the majority of cases, that is what happens. There is a resistance of reasonable counter-offers made by the state. Delays in getting background information from our clients. That's the ministries and departments. And this is to facilitate reviews of claims. Movement of officers in chambers, as the AG just spoke to, resulting in files changing hands or remaining stagnant, acting assignments, leave of absence, secondments. The volume of files that chambers contends with daily, we receive, I would say, approximately 10 new matters, ranging from advisory to contracts to litigation. All, as I said matters are usually urgent. As we have pointed out before, we are understaffed, we have been understaffed and under-resourced. And I must also point out that misplaced files is also a common problem. The way forward, I think, is what you really would like to hear. We are looking at fast tracking, and we have started fast tracking all matters, especially those that have quite some vintage. Settling matters that are stagnant in court where possible. Proper case management and prioritizing through the introduction of a case management system, file tracking system. Earlier opinions on liability and concessions were necessary. Training sessions, as just spoken to by the AG, with the ministries and departments, well, also including training sessions with the ministries and departments that we serve to further sensitize to the importance, or on the importance, in relation to the importance of timely submission of pertinent information. There is also currently ongoing a robust and largely successful public trustee backlog project, whereby all files are being reviewed and letters being sent to the applicants to determine whether or not they're interested in proceeding. And of course, affirmative responses result in the process being restarted. And in the negative, responses in the negative would result in files being closed. A number of dormant files have been closed as a result of this process, and a comparable number of matters have recommenced and have, in many cases, been concluded. Staffing, as we spoke about before, Chambers aims to be exactly what it ought to be, and I'm very serious about this. I could go on and on, Chair.
You have 20 seconds to wrap up your response.
I will.
I'm sure there will be other opportunities during the session for you to elaborate some more. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that Chambers is aiming to be a first-class legal firm with the most highly motivated and competent staff. This is one of our #1 priorities, and once given the opportunity, I will speak a little bit more on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Happy to hear about the training, and I think that will help in a significant way. The same challenge that you have and that the AG identified, where persons are transferred so that they can get additional exposure, will also mean that the training will need to be ongoing, because those who train in one place may then move on to somewhere else. The follow-up question, Mr. Chair, if I may ask, I know the economists, there is a proposal, which I think has already been approved by Cabinet, to create an economic service where the economists in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, for example, have the opportunity to call on the resources of the economists who may be in other places, not in the ministry responsible for economic affairs. And I'm just asking if, as a follow-up to the question, if something like this could work, any possibility of something like this working since there are legal persons, attorneys at law across the public service, I'm not sure if they're all fully engaged, but if they could add any resource to the SG's chambers, or if that would be more problem than solution.
Thank you, MP for St. Peter. The possibility of bringing all of the attorneys across the public service under a single umbrella does have its attractiveness. And I think that there are significant benefits that can be derived from it. The Solicitor General and I have already begun to look to see how we can make that happen. There are, for example, attorneys at law in the Ministry of Housing, but you have to remember that there was a reason why they were decentralized in the first place. So you had everybody was in the Ministry of the OAG, whatever it looked like back then, but then it became sensible to decentralize so that ministries didn't have to come to OAG but had their own dedicated attorneys. In fact, you might be the first to say that you will be happy to have one or two in the Ministry of Labor. The advantage of that, of course, is that you would be working in a dedicated area for an extended period of time and would develop expertise which is specific to that area. That is a good and a bad thing. But even though decentralization is good, I feel it is important for us to have the same training level and as much as possible the same kind of expertise across as many of our attorneys as possible. We are looking at it. We've already had meetings. We are beginning to see how it could function. There are some possible hiccups because, for example, there are some, the registrar of companies, for example, has a specialized role. And to bring that attorney into a reporting system that bears little or no relationship to what he or she does specifically might simply not make sense. But there are advantages that I believe we can gain from having a hybrid centralized system, and it is one that could well be replicated across the many other professional spheres. We take, for example, a lawyer who is moved from chambers and goes to work in the Ministry of the Public Works. That lawyer, because of some, I shall use my kindest language, because of some unusual understanding, is not able to work on matters that he or she may have pending at the AG's office. So when they move, they have to wash their hands of whatever they were working on. Or that does not make sense. It is a waste of resources. So by establishing an umbrella under which they could work, we could see that an attorney may move to work in a particular area, but can still continue to have responsibility for certain day-to-day matters. So I think that there are advantages. We've begun to work on it to see how best it can be fleshed out. And if nothing else, we will at least have the opportunity to make sure that the training standards and the skill set for all of the lawyers across the public service remains the same. If we have well-trained lawyers in chambers that move out to other places, they move out as well-trained lawyers, and they can come back as well-trained lawyers. So there are advantages, but we do foresee that there are one or two challenges that might arise, but I think that they're workable. I don't know if the SG wants to add anything to it.
Thank you, AG. Thank you, Honourable Minister. The only thing that I would add is that it is attractive, especially in relation to quality control, consistency, uniformity, and just ensuring that, you know, the work is of a particular standard, apart from just the training aspect. But again, we are working towards it, but it does pose some difficulties in relation to seniority and different specialties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ministers and officers. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Peter. Honourable Senior Minister and Member for Christchurch West.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that this Honourable Chairman be now suspended until 12:40.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until 12:40. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman is suspended until 12:40 p.m.